Ah, summer. Beaches, pina coladas, sunglasses, and early years news. Welcome to edition number 30 of the Family Early Years News Briefing. We start with the story that's all over the press right now, and that's the story that we have a new Prime Minister coming. Now, what does this mean for the early years? Well, at the same time as the new Prime Minister coming in and promising lots for all sorts of people, we've also got a spending review on the way, and the culmination of these two things means that for the first time there could be a real chance of some changes in funding for the early years. The Children's Commissioner has warned that the new Prime Minister should divert their promises for income and corporation tax cuts towards rebuilding the services for the most vulnerable children, and she might be right. The Local Government Association survey has shown that 1 in 3 local authorities will not have enough money to provide the statutory services that they need, such as child protection, by the end of this Parliament. A study by the Institute for Fiscal Studies has shown that Sure Start centres actually saved the NHS millions of pounds, which really brings into question all of the cuts that we've seen to those services over the last 6 to 7 years. We've also seen a new report that suggests that there should be a reversal of the 2-child cap on universal benefits. They found that 95% of families had to cut back on essentials, including inhalers, gas and electric, just because of this policy. Now, the government is suggesting they may open their purse strings somewhat, and this month Damien Hines has announced that they're awarding $22 million to schools in disadvantaged areas in order to expand their nursery provision. When it comes to money in the early years, we know that there's one area that really needs addressing, and that's the 30 hours. And there's been a number of reports this week that have kind of only gone to further increase those worries. The MPs from the all-party parliamentary group on the early years have brought out this report, Steps to Sustainability. And there's some pretty worrying findings. They're saying the situation is so dire that early years education may only be accessible to wealthy families in years to come. There's a 20% shortfall in funding per child. And they've given some pretty interesting recommendations to government. First of all, they talk about funding, addressing the funding gap, and maybe suggesting a yearly cross-departmental review about funding and whether we're getting the rates right. They talk about supporting practitioners by helping nurseries and early years settings to increase recruitment and retention, reducing the burden of reporting. They talk about social mobility, so we need to start prioritising deprived areas and change universal credit. And then they talk about the long term. They talk about the need to invest in an independent early years commission, and that there should be a government-led campaign to champion the work of childcare practitioners. Now, these seem like some really sensible recommendations. And actually, with the new Prime Minister coming in and the upcoming spending review, I personally feel like the most excited I am about potential change for the 30 hours than I have in a long time. Nadeem Zahawi, the early years minister, said that he agrees with them on the importance of early years and ensures them that their findings will inform the spending review in some way. Just have to wait and see how that actually impacts things. That's not all we heard about 30 hours this month. We got some government statistics that show that the take-up of 2-year-olds, those eligible for 2-year-old funding, has decreased by 5,400 children, which is something many have warned would happen as a result of the increased pressure on places because of the 30 hours. CEDA have also brought out this massive report called Counting the Cost, which shows that nurseries in England's poorest areas are twice as likely to face closure as a result of the 30 hours than those in the most affluent. It shows that 11% of nurseries lack confidence they'll be trading in a year, that 50% are reducing their staff training in order to save costs, and they're now saying that the funding gap sits at £662 million. It's certain that there's a lot going on in the 30 hours. I'm really hoping that this could be the final turning point we need to actually see some proper funding for this flagship policy. Story number 3, it's another month down and the clamour around the early years recruitment crisis is only going up. This month, it was the release of the NDNA's annual workforce survey report, which produced some pretty worrying figures. In fact, Chief Executive Panima Tanuku is calling it a full-blown crisis. Some of the figures that came out of it include that the proportion of staff qualified to level 3 has fallen to just 52%, which might threaten a drop in the quality of the provision. We've seen a 16% jump in unqualified staff. Turnover of staff is 24% compared to the UK average of 15 to 18. And by and large, we're losing those staff to retail jobs for higher salaries, with 48% leaving the sector to go and work in retail. In many ways, it was the kind of perfect month for us to produce our latest big marquee piece on recruitment. We spoke with Ruth Pimentel, the CEO of Kindred Nurseries, and Kieran Glacklin, the HR manager for Acorn, two of the UK's biggest nursery groups. And we talked to them drawing on this NDNA report and the CEDA About EY report on the early years workforce to figure out what they're doing to continue to recruit and what we can all do as a sector to improve the recruitment situation in early years. If you've got time, definitely give that a read. Our story number 4 is the news that the government has awarded the contract to run the English Hubs Training Centre and a network of English Hubs throughout the country to a leading commercial phonics provider. The centre will train and advise teachers in the literacy who will then work in these hubs to try and help support local schools in the same way that the maths hubs have worked throughout the country. The government has come under fire though for awarding the contract to a company run by Ruth Miskin, who devised the controversial Read Write Inc. phonics programme. They will run the centre in combination with ICANN and the National Literacy Trust, but there will also be 5 other phonics providers working on this. And now, while many recognise the importance of phonics, the concern is definitely that it's not sufficient for reading alone, and this singular focus could detract from the wider importance of comprehension, and that was something that David Reedy from the UK Literacy Association commented on in the Nursery World piece that we linked in the article. Go check it out, read out, and let us know what you think. Story number 5 is where we talk about the month in child development, and this month we're kicking things off with a couple of stories about maths development. The first of all was a study that found that the discussion of sounds through phonics teaching can be beneficial to child's numeracy skills as well as their literacy skills, and that nursery rhymes and songs are a great vehicle to do this. We also found that a study from Germany who showed that children who were read to before they started school went on to be better in maths test when they got to the age of 12 or 13. Just another study showing that the home situation of children is really important to both their early and later development. A study from Duke University has showed that reminding a child of their many roles, such as being a friend, a neighbour, a son, a daughter, can help them to solve problems and be more flexible with their thinking. According to the researchers, simply reminding them of these roles, of their multifaceted selves, actually gave them the mindset needed to solve some pretty complex problems. There was also a new paper that is encouraging more research on child's brain energy. I thought this was a particularly interesting one because they discussed about how a child at the age of 5 is often using around half of their energy, just a lot of their energy consumption comes from their brain, which can have interesting impact on weight gain based on the size and the capacity of a child's brain. Super interesting one to read about and consider this link between brain activity and child obesity. And finally, we have a report from the University of Georgia that's about how fathers can better develop close relationships with their children. They talked about the importance of fathers spending time with their children on non-working days and how playing activities with those children are much more valuable to develop those relationships than simple caregiving alone. Story number 6, and we have a new curriculum. The new curriculum will run from 3 to 16 and will replace the foundation stage. It's up for consultation now and it will be phased in from September 2022. And there's a focus on trying to provide all children more rich experiences. The traditional areas or subjects will be replaced with these areas of learning. And they are expressive arts, humanities, health and well-being, science and technology, mathematics and numeracy, and languages, literacy and communication. Religious education is set to now be mandatory from the age of 3, although it's clear that this needs to be a broad amount of religious views, including non-religious views as well. Broadly, it's been pretty well received, especially the approach of enabling teachers to decide the best approach to support individual achievement. But this does come with some worries about those practitioners and teachers who are more used to the prescriptive approach and may require a lot of investment in training. Over in England, we've got a timetable for the EYFS, and we've now found that schools can adopt the early learning goals a year before early years settings in September 2020, with the revised EYFS becoming implemented and statutory in September 2021. Our new section on the best opinion pieces and stories is making a comeback this month, and we lead with a story from Sue Allingham in the TES. She talks about the interesting problem of creating labelled challenges in our continuous provision and tells the story of when she went to a provision that was using these challenges that actually ended up capping learning. And she asked us all to reflect on whether these kind of challenges are really helping to enhance children's learning, or whether they're taking some of the agency away from children. Speaking of Sue, we also released this month our video from our family sessions in Manchester, where she talked about next steps, and also we had Richard Knight talking about the importance of play in early years. You can find that on our blog, where you'll see a rundown of the key talking points, as well as the full 20-minute to half an hour videos from both speakers. Next up, we have a piece from The Guardian all about whether it's a good idea or not to keep pets in classrooms. On the one hand, you have the animal charities who say that keeping pets in these brightly lit and noisy classrooms and settings aren't great for their well-being. On the other hand, you have teachers and practitioners who say that it's a great opportunity for children to learn about nature. After that, we've got featuring an interesting story that was on the Early Education blog from the Barnet Early Years Alliance. They ran this drawing and talking project where they used their EYPP funding to buy back time for the children. They brought in a specialist early years teacher who would sit with the children, draw with them and talk. A really interesting approach to using your EYPP funding to just develop time for those really close one-on-one relationships with children. Definitely worth a read. Finally, another chance to toot our own trumpet. We had a great blog series this week from our interviews with Kathy Brodie, talking about one of her favourite topics, sustained shared thinking. We published 2 articles, the first of which talking about what it is, and the second about how you can encourage more of it in your setting. Definitely worth a read. Story number 8 is where we talk about the expansions and acquisitions going on in the nursery world. And by all accounts, it's been a pretty busy month. You might have heard me earlier talking about Ruth Pimentel and how she contributed to our piece in recruitment, but you might not have heard of the name Kindred Nurseries, the group of nurseries that she's the CEO of. Now that's because they recently rebranded from Educo Education, and with it they doubled in size, acquiring 6 new settings. They're now 12. Bertram have expanded in Scotland, acquiring the 5 setting strong Enchanted Forest Nursery Group from Glasgow, taking Bertram up to 41. The Secret Garden Nursery have opened their 3rd in Gloucester, whereas Kids Planet have bought their 39th, acquiring Wendy House Day Nursery in Merseyside. They've also secured a further £6.5 million investment to support further expansion. We've got Safari Kid opening their 6th setting in Wandsworth. We've got Cherubs who've just bought their 13th nursery in Ruddington. And this all culminates in pretty good timing for a new report from Christian Co. that's showing there's quite a high demand for high quality single site settings and small groups. And that's continued to outstrip supply, showing that the high prices of last year may well be set to continue. Story number 9 is a chance to talk about the ways in which you can be getting involved in some important surveys and reports happening right now. The DFE are putting out a call for evidence on the funding arrangements for young people with SEND, and they want to hear from you. They want to reassess how they're providing the funding, and this is hopefully a really good opportunity to provide better and more funding for SEND. So it's a really important opportunity for you to share your personal experiences with them. The Gender EYE project run by Lancaster University in association with the Fatherhood Institute are asking for providers to answer their survey on why the sector is struggling to support, recruit and retain male staff. Another important chance to get your voice heard in trying to solve a really important issue in the early years. And finally, EY settings are being urged to sign up to a new charter about protecting boys who are the victims of sexual violence. This is a really important story, and I really recommend you heading over to the Nursery World website where you can read more about what it involves. A few stories to finish us off. Tops have launched their reusable nappy campaign drive in all their settings, and they're encouraging others to do the same to try and replace the massive amounts of plastic nappy waste that we produce every year. We've got a new children's laureate, Cressida Cowell, who's the author of the Emily Brown picture books and also How to Train Your Dragon. We had a great story from Bristol on the BBC News website about some kids creating their own mini Glastonbury in the playground, complete with stages, portable loos and the ever fashionable bucket hat. We've got the UK's first gymnastics nursery where children have beams, monkey bars, vaults and even a giant foam pit. Sounds pretty good to me. In the Best of Social, we had this beautiful conversation that you should definitely go and watch that a dad had with his son all about the Empire TV finale. So cute watching this dad just engaged with his son, and the son was just babbling back to him, not really using full words, but it really felt like an honest and interesting conversation. I think that we can all learn a lot from that sort of parenting. And finally, we had children at Petersfield Infant School who took part in an attempt to beat the current cuddly toy world record, with 251 children cuddling their favourite cuddly toy in the playground. That's it for this month. We'll see you again in a month's time for more early years news. But in the meantime, go and join the conversation on Twitter, on Facebook, we're on Instagram. You can find us on YouTube now, where we've actually got some great interviews coming up soon. And as ever, head over to the family blog. We've got some brilliant content out there and some great articles from the likes of Sue Allingham. We spoke with Kathy Brodie recently, Kathy Nutbrown on schemas. There's all sorts of great stuff there, so go ahead and check it out if you've got a spare 5-10 minutes to read up on some great early years news. See you next month. Airplanes in the night sky are like shooting stars. I could really use a wish right now.
You know, that's good. I didn't know this.